Need help marketing your startup? Well, then you should check out omnipublic.global. That's what they specialize in, is marketing for startups. And we want to thank them today for being our sponsor of the Grit Daily Like a Boss podcast. Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Grit Daily Like a Boss podcast. You've got me, your host here, Loralyn Mears. And today we've got a wonderful guest. This is Miriam Rivera. She is the co-founder and CEO of Ulu Ventures. And what's really interesting about that is that they focus on a message believing that diversity is profitable, not just trendy. If that doesn't already speak volumes and spark your interest, well, then maybe this will. They have 8 unicorns in their portfolio. This is absolutely incredible, something that you don't really see. In addition to all of the work that Miriam is doing with respect to bringing transparency and diversity to investment, managing one of the world's largest Latin American investment companies called Ulu Ventures, she has also had numerous roles in and around Stanford University on the Board of Trustees, the Licensing Advisory Board, Board of Visitors, the Law School, Dean's Advisory Council, and I could go on and on, but enough of me. Let's welcome Miriam. Hey, Miriam.
Hi, Loralyn. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. We're really excited to hear about what you've seen down there in Silicon Valley. As I said, 8 unicorns? That's incredible. How do you think that came to pass?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with our diversity thesis, in that most of our teams, including the teams that are part of those unicorns, had a diverse team member. And in our lexicon, the diversity means having women, underrepresented minorities such as Asian, Indian, Middle Eastern, and other groups, as well as immigrants as a part of a team. And most of our teams, probably 3/4, 80% of our teams in Fund 2 and currently in Fund 3 have at least one founder that is from one of those groups.
So Miriam, I often hear a lot of misconceptions in and around when people raise the word diversity. To a lot of people, they think, oh, that just means if I'm Black or I'm brown, I invest in Blacks or I invest exclusively in browns. But that's not really the full part of diversity, and there's differently abled and there's cognitive differences. Tell us about Ulu Ventures and what diversity really means to you and how you are all embracing it.
Well, we as a team ourselves look at diversity in multiple ways. One, we do look at gender diversity, and we look at linguistic, ethnic, racial diversity. And in our companies, one of the things I want to point out is that because of the nature of software development, probably more of our founders are white male than any other group, but almost all of our teams have other representations of diversity within the team. And across our teams, you will find all white male teams, all white women teams, you'll find all minority-led teams. And what we're doing is just allowing the natural variation that is in tech to find its way into our portfolio by using a data-driven approach that reduces cognitive bias in our decision-making so that we don't eliminate the diversity that's out there in our entrepreneurship population.
I like that. That was one of the things I had read, that you guys had worked with Stanford on that, so that instead you're leveraging diversity versus checking that box. Is that fair?
Right. We love to see teams that have any kinds of founders that are developing technology that we really think has the opportunity to create first billion-dollar valuation companies and second billion-dollar revenue companies. And we think a lot of ideas have been overlooked because they're not ideas that the existing investor base necessarily relates to. And we love to see when companies are working with markets that people hadn't really perceived as big markets, because they may be markets where women are the bigger customers. They may be markets where low-income people are represented, and that's not what you typically find behind a venture capital desk. So we love both that the diversity of our entrepreneurs creates more effective and higher performing teams, we also love that they are sometimes pursuing markets that others don't realize are big and profitable.
One of the other things that I've heard about Ulu that I believe separates you from many of the other investment groups out there is that you've got this full suite of support services to truly enable the entrepreneurs to focus on what they do, which is building the company, and not have to focus on all of the support and marketing advice and legal bits. Can you tell us a little bit more about those founder support services that you offer?
They're targeted support. It's not like some of the big firms that have full-time people that work with each company. Like, let me say, we're in the world of venture, we're considered, now that we're at 138 million, a small firm. Before that, we were considered a micro firm. And so what we have is the expertise of a team that has been in venture for decades. We also have teams that have, really strong operational backgrounds. Like our CFO is an MBA, a CFA. Our head of company support, Kevin Hoffberg, has 40 years of marketing and sales training experience to bring to bear on startup companies. Our head of Marcom is an Emmy and Peabody award-winning journalist who was one of the early journalists for CNN. So we have just built a great team of people, in part because of the mission that we have and their wholehearted support and belief of that mission.
Oh, it's incredible. And that's where it has to go, right? Top to bottom. I hear this often from several of the guests that I speak with when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and really trying to get towards that almost mystical idea of cohesion. They say part of the problem is that too many people are checking the boxes and they don't put in all of these robust metrics and support programs along the way to be able to truly enable success and diversity. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Well, I think that we're a team that is founded on the principle that differences actually are things that are complementarities. And the founding team of Ulu Ventures is actually myself and my husband, Clint Corver. So we're also unusual in venture in that we are a family running a business together, like a lot of businesses in the world. And frankly, even a lot of startups in the world have different family members working within them. We had very different backgrounds coming to Stanford. We each graduated from there. I came from a really working class family where my mother had less than an 8th grade education. She later on got her GED, but she was raising 5 kids on her own through most of my life. And my husband came from a more middle class background in Iowa, but he was white, Protestant, middle class. He's a libertarian. So we were about as different as two people could be. And over our life, we've really worked at building a family that is built on a foundation of respect for those differences and being able to also apply them in a business setting. And that complementarity has really allowed us to be successful in both the business and our family life.
And since you've raised up this family life, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be very curious about this, it's been hard enough for folks to go to work as couples and to be able to have that separation between work and home. And then now sharing that space for the last year and a half with COVID, you're not only living together, but you're working together. Has anything surprised you about that experience and that working relationship?
Well, we've actually done really well during hard times over the course of our marriage. And so I would say that COVID has kind of added to our confidence of being able to work together through difficulty. And, that started way back when we were startup founders together. We were in a startup, and when the Series B venture capitalists came in, they said they didn't want a husband and wife team. And guess which person they asked to step out? It was the wife.
No! Oh, I hate hearing stuff like this. It makes all the hairs on my spine stand up.
But I think that, we made it through that. And, founder breakups are never easy, and that wasn't an easy situation for us. We've gone through the 2001, the 2008, and now the pandemic together. And so I think what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And for us, the pandemic was really a time to reflect on both our portfolio, and we were very actively working with dozens of our companies as they were making hard decisions. Do they sell at less than what they've raised? Do they have to cut people? Do they try to keep people? What can they really do to make it through what we expected to be up to a 2-year cycle that could potentially hurt some of their businesses? And so from our point of view, we also use that time to reflect on Ulu and what did we want to accomplish. And it really confirmed that we were doing exactly what we want to be doing at this point in our lives, where we feel the combination of our kind of mission-driven philosophy around diversity and our really quantitative approach to making investment decisions that utilizes the same criteria for all comers, that was really something that gives us a strong foundation to build what we hope will be a legacy business that other newer members of our company, as we grow, will be able to continue into the future, because we think that the U.S. is, really just starting to address diversity in productive ways in corporate life, and that companies like our startups really can make a tremendous difference in terms of career attainment and addressing the wealth gap for women and people of color.
Let's tap into that a little bit as far as your vision, and you're already sharing where you see wanting to make an impact and having that legacy. You've evolved as Ulu Ventures already from a micro investment, firm, all the way now to, like you said, a small investment firm. But if I said, what, Miriam, is your wild and crazy vision of success? How do you define success? Because so many investors, it's about more money. You've had 8 unicorns. Are you aiming for 10? Will you stop at 20? What does success look like? How do you define it?
Really quickly, I would say that our vision of success is to build a firm that within the next 10 years will have $1 billion in assets under management, and that is positioned to have the next generation of leaders remain majority minority and majority women-led.
Oh, fantastic. I wish you all the best with that vision. I'd love to see that, and I'll be tracking your success going forward here. So, all right, let's keep the conversation going. Now, you've been into this for a while, and as you said, had a number of twists and turns along the way with various investment strategies, and you've left a significant mark already as you continue to do at Stanford. But what is the one thing or couple of things that you wish that someone had told you?
I think with startups and with a venture firm, the thing I wish people had told me is that it takes about 10 years to become an overnight success.
I've heard that from Eric Yuan of Zoom. He was interviewed, I guess, really maybe about this time last year at the height of COVID when it was coming on, and they said, wow, how does it feel to go like overnight success? He's like, yeah, it's been a really long decade. And that's about it, right?
Yeah, and I definitely think he's done it faster than most. And when I was at Google, we did it in about 5 years, but it was a very hard 5 years. Literally at times, like part of my hair fell out from the amount of stress and the amount of overwork and the lack of sleep. So I can really say you can accomplish 10 years worth of things in 5, but it won't be easy and it won't be comfortable.
No, it definitely takes its toll. I've had numerous issues myself on those kinds of things. You just push and push and you think you can keep going, and then your body goes, stop.
Exactly.
Looking back, if I gave you some magic beans and said, Miriam, you get to go back and undo one thing in your life, what are you going to change?
It's interesting. thought about this a lot actually the last year. My father passed from COVID in October, and I've taken a lot of time to reflect on our life because my father was a difficult person. He was a physically and sexually abusive parent in our household. He really wasn't very present for us after he left. And I sometimes wish I had a different beginning to my life. And I guess I've come to realize over the course of the last year that I just wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't believe the things that I do, and I wouldn't be advocating for the strong sense of possibility that I do as a venture capitalist with our entrepreneurs if I hadn't had that background where I had to show myself that you really can do anything you set your mind to.
Oh, that's an incredible backstory. It sounds like you've just taken all of that negative energy and put it into not only transformation, but into resilience. And then now you're leveraging it to give back to others, right? And empower others so they don't have to experience some of the things that you have. That's incredible, Miriam. I had goosebumps here.
Thank you. It's been a tremendous learning year for me. And I think that's important too. As people get older, there's a sense, especially in Silicon Valley, that youth is everything. And I have really come to realize that, some learnings you're going to do over the course of a year, some you're going to do over the course of a decade, and some you're going to learn over the course of a lifetime. And that all of that is making you someone who can make a greater contribution.
Oh, indeed. Cheers to that, right? And thinking of that, love to tap into, it's been a number of years since I've lived in Silicon Valley. Give us a sense of what's going on in that investment landscape right now as we're sort of coming out of this whole COVID fog. And it seemed like there was quite the acceleration of investment toward the end of 2020. And from all accounts that I've seen, it's fast and furious now. What are you seeing? What can you share? What's going on in Silicon Valley?
Well, we've been going through a whole SPAC phenomenon around companies that are going public through an alternate means compared to the typical initial public offering process. And, that's kind of had its highs and lows in the Valley, but it has allowed a number of our companies in our own portfolio to go public. We have about 4 that have either filed to go public, gone public, or are still waiting to go public. And so that's created both liquidity for some investors, which is one reason why you're seeing investment really at a very fast clip here in the Valley. The other thing that we're seeing is a ton of investment in areas like blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And we're very invested in companies in these capital markets and new ways to think about capital markets and how they should function and how they should use technology. And we're very excited about blockchain in particular because we see it as kind of like the next internet. If you think about the internet as having provided a means of connecting the world and allowing all sorts of new things to connect people and knowledge, resources, like I will say for Google, for example, it was kind of like making the world's information available to people 24/7. That used to be kind of locked up in libraries and archives and businesses and governments. That's an incredible foundation business. Then you think about the Facebooks of the world and, WhatsApp and all these other kinds of social media platforms that found new ways for us to connect with each other. And we think that the blockchain is creating the rails for the financial services aspects of our life for the future. And so that's something that we're really invested in and will likely continue to invest in. We also invest in human beings. And I know with the age of technology and robotics, sometimes that seems a little different, but future of work, education, e-learning, retooling, they've all been parts of our investment thesis since the very beginning. And some of our unicorns are in that space. Companies like Guild Education and BetterUp, for example, that are really helping workers to be able to keep up with the changes and the way that work is done so they can be productive, contributing members of the community throughout their lives, because one, education isn't enough anymore to keep up with the cycle of technological change at work.
Exactly. We're shifting from jobs and career-based to role-based, right, and skills-based. What can you do given the skill set that you've acquired or upskilled to be able to do? That seems to be the paradigm shift that's fundamentally happening right now, not only in HR, but just in workforce development in general.
Absolutely. And we're seeing that, and we're seeing new companies that are addressing that issue with either new kinds of online learning platforms, online curricula, and online communities, some of which are intended to support particular communities that are more challenged than others in terms of adapting to the new workplace, or frankly, where the workplace needs to adapt more to the realities of life. You know, as you're seeing, for example, we had to stop so much of the way that work has been getting done because millions of women had to drop out of the workforce in the last year. And it's indicative that there really wasn't a plan that included women being in the workforce long-term throughout a life cycle that includes normal things like having children. And we need to change the way work gets done in the future so we don't cause so much disruption to so many companies and to the people who work for them if we have events like the pandemic or other economic disruptions in the future.
That said, do you have a tip that you'd want to offer to the next generation of women?
I'll offer two things that have really helped me, one of which is very brief: change the message. As a young girl growing up in a low-income neighborhood with a mother with very limited education who was pregnant in her teens and was the descendant of a woman who was pregnant in her teens, the expectation was that I wouldn't amount to much. And that was really clear in terms of the messages that are given to women of color from low-income backgrounds. And we could see how even in the pandemic, their very lives and their safety were not taken into consideration by our leaders. And they were put on the front lines without PPE and without the value of their lives and the dignity of the work that they do being promoted by our leaders. And I think for many of us, that caused us to change the message and to realize that these precious lives that go to work and do the work of our country in terms of childcare, elder care, working at the grocery store, all these people are doing incredibly valuable work that supports our lives, and that we need to change the message about work and how much money people make and how valuable human beings are.
Indeed. We all have that power to start shifting that narrative. Those of us that have platforms can use them to that end. We can choose to. And that comes down to a personal choice and even at a business choice with respect to a brand ethos.
And I think you saw a lot of people doing that and, paying people more, working to create, shields for those that had to work with the general public. You saw people, donating masks that they had at home. I think there was a lot of really uplifting things in the middle of a lack of leadership in our country that was just astounding to me, and initially incredibly discouraging. But just watching the response of average Americans to the needs of their fellow citizens. And, in particular, I think in the tech sector, there was really a call to action from a lot of our founders. Rachel Carlson, who is the head of Guild Education, she and Brittany Stitch, who is her co-founder, were really advocating for companies to be proactive in their response to the pandemic. They were advocating for companies to continue to employ as many people as they possibly could during the pandemic, and to try to have a stakeholder mentality in running their companies. And we think that that is not only good for the stakeholders, it's really good for business, because many Americans want to spend their money and align with companies that have those kinds of values.
All right. Now, Ulu Ventures has had already terrific success, and you, Miriam, on your own as an individual, have also had enormous success. But if we can turn things around and say, is there any way that our audience can help you?
Yes. In fact,
okay, great. Clear answer. Love it. Go.
This is a clear moment where we can really be helped by your community. One, we are in the process of looking for those next generation hires that will be the future of Ulu Ventures. So we are looking for a principal and an associate, and we hope to hire folks that have the principal, some experience in the world of venture, who wants to work in a mission-driven venture capital firm that values diversity and quantitative and data-driven decision-making, both in the hope of reducing bias and increasing access to capital for diverse teams that can literally build the public companies of the future. So that's what we're looking for in terms of people. And in your audience, I hope there are young folks who are thinking about venture capital careers that may be the right ones.
Now that's a clear call to action. Fantastic. And we'll spell it out in the podcast notes as well. Excellent. All right, audience, you heard her. Ulu Ventures, that's what they're looking for. All right, last question, Miriam. If we peeked into your closet and we found a pair of shoes that best represented your personality, what are we looking at? Is it a pair of boots, stilettos, sneakers, flats, flip-flops, something else?
Despite the fact that I love beaches, it would be boots. And I am actually wearing a particularly special pair of boots today that were made for me by Rocket Buster Boots in El Paso, Texas, at the behest of a dear friend, Beto Payares, who's one of our first limited partners in Ulu Ventures. And they are cowboy boots, but the shaft of the boot is designed with a Hawaii beach theme or a Puerto Rican beach theme because I love beaches.
Oh, that's excellent. And tell me, please, that you've got some glitter or some sequins or something fun on there.
Oh, they're totally fun, but they have no glitter or sequins, but they have pictures of butterflies and tropical plants on a beach.
Well, I like that idea. I'm a glitter girl, so I go crazy for all things glittery. All right.
That pair. Amazing work.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Miriam Rivera, co-founder of Ulu Ventures, who's really going beyond diversity and saying that it's much more than something that's trendy. In fact, it can make businesses and change the trajectory of so many people's lives. Thank you so much, Miriam, for being on our show today.
Thank you, Loralyn. It's been fun. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And I'd like to invite everyone, don't forget to follow Grit Daily News and subscribe to the podcast. Bye, Miriam.
Bye-bye.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?